By the second half of the 19th century, series of grandiose architectural works had appeared in turn in Saigon City, among which there was a palace with a very magnificent and imposing architecture. The construction of this palace was completed in 1890, which is now the Museum of Ho Chi Minh City, number 65 Lý Tự Trọng Street, District 1. There might have been other buildings that have witnessed many activities and events of high-ranking levels through historical changes of Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, for more than a century, like this museum. In the 19th century, Saigon was a big city, but it was still densely covered with the remaining trees of a primary high tree forest area. The banyan tree is the remaining vestige now. There was then the market of banyan tree, or commonly called corn market, at this place. The market where paper, ink, pens, and inklets for candidates were sold. A superb palace was built opposite the ancient banyan tree. Up to now, the whole palace has been intactly preserved as initially, except for the two goddess statues at the main gate, which were replaced by a big eaves. It took 5 years, from 1885 to 1890, to complete the construction of the palace, which was aimed at being used as a commercial museum, also the first museum made by the French in Indochina. The facade has the manner of the French neoclassic style, combined with the southern indigenous cultural features with vividly decorated patterns. The most solemn position was reserved for the statue of the face of the commercial goddess. The big decorative pattern, a symbol of wealth of the Orient, was carved at the back row. At the two endings were the two heads of the shrewd eagles. Many other patterns show the images of the waterways area of Cochin China. Crocodiles, the king of marshes, pelican, big birds living on the rich water surface, and calves turning into dragons in accordance with the Oriental legend. The bushy tropical leaves and trees have turned into artistic embossment. No other palaces in the ancient Saigon have such portly rows of pillars as this one. The line of round pillars at the facade has the image of the line of subtle pagoda pillars of South Vietnam. At the top of each pillar is the sculpture of a soldier. At the bottom, between two pillars, there are embossments of flowers and leaves and the heads of the strong lions. There are big pillars and embossments at all four sides of the palace. At the two sides, the square pillars were built consecutively. The pillar tops were decorated with the embossments of two rotational topics. The couple of snakes binding swords as a symbol of power, a ship cleaving the waves, an image of seaway commerce. Behind the building, a tower reproducing the top of a lighthouse was built on the main axis. Looking up from the bottom, it looks like a lighthouse tower. The impressive appearance in the vast area makes the palace worth a work of art with an imposing architecture. It had been initially planned to use the palace as a museum, but after the construction was completed, the governors of the South took this place as their own residential building from 1890 to 1945, which means 55 years. After half a century, the palace suddenly witnessed the special historical change of Saigon. Within only a year, 5 forces took turn occupying the building in succession. In 1945, in March, the Japanese staged a coup d'etat to the French. The French governor's building became the Japanese governor's building. In April, Bảo Đại Kinh established the cabinet of Trần Trọng Kim. The Japanese delivered this building to the government as the palace of the king's special envoy. On August the 19th, the August Revolution was successful in Hanoi. The general uprising burst out throughout the country. On August the 25th, in Saigon, Viet Minh occupied the palace of the king's special envoy, hanging the red flag of a yellow star. The palace became the headquarters of the Administrative Committee of the Resistance of South Vietnam. On September the 2nd, 1945, in Hanoi, President Ho Chi Minh read the Declaration of Independence, establishing Republic Democracy of Vietnam. On September the 11th, the U.S. General Crisis, complying with the order of the Allied forces, disarmed the Japanese troops. Saigon, on behalf of Vietnam, welcomed the Allied forces in the position of an independent country. In order to express the attitude of cooperation with the Allied, the Administrative Committee of the Resistance of South Vietnam moved to Doc Lý Palace, which is now the headquarters of the People's Committee of Ho Chi Minh City. The palace became the headquarters of the British missions in the Allied forces. On October the 5th, the British forces handed over the palace to the French, used as the headquarters of the Commissioner of the French Republic in Vietnam. On November the 29th, 1945, the representative of the Japanese troops submitted the sword in the agreement to surrender the Allied part. But 2 months before that, the French army attacked Vietnam with the collusion of the UK and the US. On September the 23rd of the same year, South Vietnam carried out a war of resistance, opening the resistance against the French invaders. In May 1947, after reoccupying Indochina, the French established the government of South Vietnam country, using the palace as the headquarters of the Governor's Department of the South for this government. After the eventful year of 1945, the building returned peaceful outwardly. More than 4 years after that, a struggle occurred which has come into the undaunted history of the city. On January the 9th, 1950, more than 2,000 students of Saigon had a demonstration at the palace, which was then the headquarters of Governor's Department of the South of Bảo Đại government, demanding the release of the students arrested for student strike to protest the reactionary policy of the colonies. The demonstration was suppressed. Trần Văn Ơn, the student of Petriski High School, sacrificed his life. Thousands of Saigoners attended the funeral of the student Ơn, expressing their spirits of patriotism. The press media reported then the sea of people quickly flocked to the event for 8 hours and commented that it was a ceremonial funeral. There has never been such a ceremonial funeral since ancient times. Nowadays, the statue of Trần Văn Ơn was put in the park in front of the museum, directed toward the place where he bravely and gloriously lay down, and January the 9th has become the National Students' Day. In 1954, the meaningful victory of the Vietnamese army ended 80 years of the French rule. After the Geneva Convention in 1954, Vietnam was divided into 2 regions. The palace was changed into the head office of Bảo Đại government in South Vietnam. Bảo Đại changed the name of La Grandière Street in front of the palace into Gia Long Street and named the palace Gia Long Palace. Under the arrangement of the US, Ngô Đình Diệm became the Prime Minister of Bảo Đại government. In 1955, Diệm staged a coup d'etat in the form of a referendum, setting up the Vietnam Republic government, of which he was the president, making every effort to wipe out all the diversion and opposing forces. Ngô Đình Diệm moved to Notre-Dame Palace, changing its name into Independent Palace, and used Gia Long Palace as the National Guest Palace. In 1960, the movement of general uprising and the birth of National Front for the Liberation of South Vietnam brought the revolution of the South to a new period. The disagreements inside Saigon government became critical. In February 1962, the coup d'etat force dropped a bomb to the Independence Palace. The air attack to kill brothers Diệm Nhu was unsuccessful. Ngô Đình Diệm moved into National Guest Palace, but the Saigoners still called it Gia Long Palace. From then on, series of events occurred to the palace repeatedly for the second time, a coup d'etat, fighting over power and authorities inside Saigon government. The documents kept in the museum showed a tense period occurring in the palace. The list of bodyguard forces at Gia Long Palace were checked again, with very strict regulations for the control of the palace. Not feeling secure enough, Ngô Đình Diệm had a tunnel system inside the palace made. The tunnel system has 4 entrances, divided into 2 directions, at the top of the corridor on the 2 floors. This is an entrance on the corridor of the 2nd floor, with a thick iron door. There are also 2 entrances like that on the 1st floor. Behind the door is a quite narrow staircase. The 2 stairs from the upper floor and from the lower floor meet each other, and then continue leading further deep down. Coming down further, the tunnel becomes larger, with the 4 walls made of strong ferro-concrete. There are many perpendicular turning points leading to the stairs and corridors. There are total 6 rooms in the whole tunnel. In this room still remains the round table, lounge, armchair in the underground on the day when brothers Yim Nhu hid themselves for the first time and also for the last time in this same palace. The room next door is used to introduce some documentary pictures and images about the palace. Linking to this room is the way of escape. A lot of sensational details have been adorned about the underground. It was said that the underground led to Saigon River or linked to Chalon. In reality, it was only used as a shelter. The entrance of escape up is still located in the palace, in the backyard of the building. In 1963, to deal with the growth of the Revolutionary of the South, the U.S. pulled the strings for Saigon generals and commanders to stage a coup d'etat. On November the 1st of that year, the coup d'etat force attacked Yalong Palace. The brothers Yim Nhu took shelter in the underground, making a phone call to ask for help from the military forces but received no response. They got out of the underground, taking advantage of the disorder to escape quietly from the back door of the palace, picked up by a Chinese rice lord, taking them to Chalon. 2 days later, when Yim Nhu were attending the mass at Cha Tam Church, they were arrested and killed in the armored car. The regime of Ngo came to an end. The high-ranking officials of Saigon rushed to struggle for power. From 1964, the palace was called Head of State Palace, witnessing spinning changes. Within only 20 months, 6 successive governments took turns succeeding the power. After 3 years of confusion, the U.S. finally chose Nguyễn Văn Thiệu. At the end of October 1966, Nguyễn Văn Thiệu quickly moved from Yalong Palace to the newly built Independence Palace. The Head of State Palace was changed into that of the head office of the Supreme Court with a very peaceful appearance. This quiet appearance was an opposite to the internal situation of the court as well as the Vietnam Republic regime before the storms of the revolution. On the afternoon of April the 30th, 1975, the tank of the Liberation Troop pushed the gate of the Independence Palace open. The Liberation flag was flying on the central establishment of Saigon government. The reunification of the country was a complete victory. After the Liberation Day of April the 30th, 1975, the palace was used to hold a series of exhibitions on revolution. In August 1978, the People's Committee made a decision to establish the Museum of Revolution of Ho Chi Minh City. In 1999, it was upgraded to become the Museum of Ho Chi Minh City, a museum of local research. Having undergone nearly a century of historical ups and downs, the palace finally became Ho Chi Minh City Museum as initially planned. Moreover, inside, its contents are much more diverse than those of a commercial museum. There are now hundreds of thousands of documents, objects, pictures, and statues to choose from to establish the art galleries, marking the historical process of a region and a large city in this museum. The Nature Archaeology Room in the museum re-expresses the wild era of Saigon hundreds of thousands of years earlier. The nature was ignored and forgotten for hundreds of years. 300 years ago, the reclaimers could only see crocodiles swim in the river and tigers roar in the forest. Saigon was then still located in the jungle region with a rich deal of valuable wood. The richness of this jungle appears here and there in each specimen of wood. Longer than that, a prehistoric civilization was formed. Roughly 3,500 years back, ancient men who then conquered nature with stone-made tools appeared. The simplest example of this is the grindstone and then the stone axe. Pottery was made and men succeeded in controlling fire. 1,000 years later, or about 2,500 years ago, the ancient Saigoners made bricks to build houses and temples. They casted metals. Iron items were made: javelins, razors, hooks, and spears. Given their developed skill and knowledge in processing, the ancient Saigoners beautified themselves with jewels perfectly made of various materials, from shells of mollusks, from stone or gem. Some jewelry were made of glass or a jade with different colors. The earrings into animal heads exemplify the unique product of fine arts, and they embody many meanings in archaeological research. Gold became a precious metal. The great flow of excellent creativity of the ancient residents in the land of Saigon, Gia Định, Jalern, made a local cultural foundation for forming and developing a new culture, given the new historical conditions. Afterwards lived for thousands of years, during which time the inhabitants here lived without any supervision, Saigon was awakened. In 1698, Supreme Commander Nguyễn Hữu Cảnh, ordered by King Nguyễn Phúc Chu, went to rule the south and established two towns here. One is Trấn Biên and the other is Phiên Trấn. The Bát Quái Citadel, a masterpiece of the army at that time, was built in 1790 to defend the southern large region. Saigon was then chosen to be the center of the south under the name of Gia Định Citadel. This seal was minted in 1802, the year when King Gia Long established the country. The seal was conferred on Late Marshal Lê Văn Duyệt, the person who was twice elected by the Nguyễn dynasty, the defense general of the Gia Định Citadel. The Administrative Geography Room exhibits many maps produced by Vietnamese and French people through many stages of chaos and development. In 17th century, the unfinished Bát Quái Citadel had a unit of troops available. At the end of the 18th century, the traffic system around the fortress was expanding. At the turn of the 19th century, the two military works, Bát Bính Fence and Bát Quái Citadel, were still mapped by the Southerners to recall the period past through leveled. At the end of the 19th century, name Saigon officially replaced Gia Định Citadel. In the middle of the 20th century, the city expanded and merged with other neighboring administrative units. In 1975, Saigon further expanded and got divided into districts. After the North and the South got unified in 1975, Saigon was then changed to Ho Chi Minh City. Given the geographical, political, and military advantages, the city became the biggest junction of waterways in Vietnam at that time and up to now. The Room of Commercial Port Trade Service demonstrates this special function. The watch lines were used along rivers for the day and night transportation of goods. The speedometers on those ships which guided larger ships to and from the sea. Navigation to the immense sea developed further than before. Saigon Port in the 19th century was the most important junction of waterways in Indochina. The sea was full of markets selling goods of various kinds. Bến Thành and Binh Tây markets were well-known commercial centers. There was specialization of trading through theme markets such as fruit markets and fish markets. Along the rivers and canals appeared ports and warehouses for agricultural products, especially rice. The Mekong Delta at that time virtually transported all its goods to Saigon Port. Due to the huge amount of rice and fast transportation, people rarely weighed the rice but measured it in volume. They did this with buckets of 20 liters and 40 liters. Smaller amounts of rice were measured with containers of a liter, half a liter, and milk cans of a quarter liter. They also measured the volume of rice with compartments on dry quarts, using cards to indicate the quantity. The smallest number was the cart of 1 dry quart. The bigger one was that of 10 dry quarts, 1,000 dry quarts. There was another kind of cart which was used to count the number of rice bags brought out and into the warehouse. Each incoming and outgoing bag was equivalent with a cart. Scales were also used for weighing smaller amounts of goods, and there were various kinds of scales, fixed ones and movable ones. Jewelers and physicians used assay balances. Small scales were elaborately made with a design of fine arts, engravings, and usually with decorative conical tops, which expressed people's desire for good luck and prosperity. These were tools for measurement and calculation. The cloth measured tape of different sizes and inlaid with shells or pearl. Abacuses were used for calculation, applied by the Oriental people for many centuries. Mechanical computers imported from the West were quickly put into use. There were many goods, many markets, and many trade activities. At the market, there were stands for the domestic items for their daily life, from gasoline to oil lamps, bowls, vases, and handicrafts or products. The room of industry and handicraft introduces another lively aspect of Saigon. The handicraft villages here were early formed. Many pottery mills appeared and developed very fast and became famous at that time. Some of these were Cây Mai pottery, Đồng Hòa and Bửu Nguyên. More and more jewelers rushed to those places where people were richer. Jewelry workers didn't need so much space or professional equipment. The most important thing is their talent. Bronze minting also developed quite early. Bronze pots were used as family kitchenware items. Bronze trays used for meals, parties, and festivals. Rich families had bronze trays delicately engraved with dragons and pictures, engraved with ancient stories, each engraved line. Bronze-made items in ancient Saigon were also used for worship. This bronze urn was made based on people's inspirations of the bamboo tree, whose details had been carefully selected. The bronze items of ancient Saigon were minted in such molds as these. Engraving occupation was quite simple, but tools for engraving were of various kinds to make engraved lines or frame of fine arts. Products engraved with birds, flowers, and bonsai as domestic decorations must be made by highly skillful workers. Horizontal lacquer boards and parallel sentences, after being engraved, were ground, plated with gold, and hung in formal corners of the house. The engraving occupation was formerly called carpentry. Carpenters made panel houses. Halls were divided by poles without walls. Each engraving was used for decoration with its own meaning. The engraving of the bed is a way of symbolizing the expectation of good luck, and paper and pens the expectation of literacy. Birds and flowers symbolize 4 seasons with moderate rain and wind. A marriage life and reproduction in the panel house was a lifetime dream of the urban people in Saigon, a land active and diverse. Saigon was not only a commercial center, but also a city of bravery. The rebellion of the South, the Saigoners for the first time linked to become forced under the hammer and crescent flag. The rebellion failed, but it was the whistle to begin the fight with the Saigoners and people in 13 southern provinces, resounding in 1940s. The pictures express the high spirits of bravery in Saigon on the day of Democratic Republic of Vietnam, which was declared on the 2nd of September 1945, recalling independence or death, a declaration of Saigon to the world. At this ceremony, the party committee secretary Trần Văn Dầu delivered a speech to confirm the spirit of a country who had just gained independence, which was a victory song for the Vietnamese people. The resistance war against America is a major topic of the museum. In 1960, the People's Liberation Frontier of the South was established. The small armed forces became bigger troops, using from simple weapons, self-made bombs and mines, to oil lamps or anything that could be made without modern technology, from the perfume bottle, an American bomblet. Gucci Tunnel lies right at the gate leading to Saigon. These three-story tunnels stretch over 200 kilometers, ascending, descending, and crisscrossing. Fighting days and nights in spite of rain or sunshine, optimistically believing in the day of success. A quiet corner of the forest is recounted. A veranda's roof stops coming rain, and a hammock brings one to sleep. The toe-shaped backpack, the narrow-brimmed soft cap conveys the image of the Vietnamese soldiers. The rubber sandals was a unique invention of the Vietnamese soldiers. The equipment of the soldier accompanied him during the battle. The battlefield was full of guns and bullets. The Saigoners went on strike with the banners that read, "Wake up to go, our fellow countrymen." Vietnam, Vietnam, its just fighting was supported by all international friends, which was enormous and unforgettable. The historic victory in the spring 1975, liberation of the South and reunification of the two regions, opened a new chapter for the country's history. The period of 30 years into resistance, full of sacrifice and hardships for the independence, liberty, happiness, succeeded. Since becoming a museum in local scientific research, Ho Chi Minh City Museum had regularly hosted theme exhibitions. Vietnamese money exhibited 1,086 monetary objects made via 10 centuries. All the feudalist dynasties used coins. Thái Bình Hưng Bảo in the Dinh dynasty at the second half of the 10th century was the first form of money in Vietnam. From the end of the 10th century to the end of the 14th century, money was also used by the former Lê, Lý, and Trần dynasties. The money in the later Lê, Ma, prosperous Middle Lê, was fairly developed since the beginning of the 14th century to the second half of the 18th century. The last feudalist money was that of the Nguyen dynasty, with Bảo Đại Thông Bảo. The feudalist dynasties produced a special kind of money, bigger in size, and used for awarding those who positively contributed to the crown. During the period of French domination, Indochina used the currency made by the French. The French Indochina currency was used in the three Indochinese countries, which became the currencies of Cochin China Resistance War after being sealed by the stamp of the Resistance Committee. The currency of Vietnam Democracy Republic issued from 1945 to 1975 had undergone many changes in accordance with the realities of historical situation. The currency of Vietnam Republic was closely associated with this regime from 1954 to 1975. Since 1976, the currency of the Vietnam Social Republic has been issued. Another major theme exhibition has gone through 10 centuries, displaying the collection of 1,000 years of Vietnamese pottery, accounted from the times of feudal dynasties, from Lý dynasty, 11th and 12th centuries to the subsequent dynasties, Re Lê, Trần, Post Lê, Ma, Middle Prosperous Lê. The potteries of each dynasty not only inherited the quintessence of the predecessors, but also received their own graphic elements, colors, and fine arts. The brothers of the famous pottery kings also made contribution to the pottery village for 1,000 years here. There were Bát Tràng porcelain pottery in the north with soft colors, the traditional terracotta-made Thổ Hà trade village, well known. There were Ngũ Quảng porcelain pottery in central Vietnam. Lai Thieu pottery in South Vietnam with thick emerald with various blue and red colors. Saigon pottery with deep blue glaze, brass blue, yellow, red. Especially Saigon pottery in the past put great emphasis on the topic of characters of worship, as we can see here. The goddess of mercy with relaxed figures, judging Mandarin. The one in the world of the dead, deciding on merits and sins, is smiling gently. Goddess of salvation with lovely shouting face. The major exhibition on special subjects enhanced the diversity for the Museum of Large-Scale Research. The palace used to be the witness of many historical events. The palace itself is a historical exhibit. mingling with other exhibits and objects displayed inside, has formed the Museum of Ho Chi Minh City, unique in history, culture, arts, a special destination of Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City.